Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So, a new poll came out today out of the state of Virginia, and it shows that Donald Trump is still in a very good position in the state. It came out of Roanoke College, which is a highly respected pollster, and in 2020, they got the margin down perfectly. They said that Donald Trump would fall short by 11 points in Virginia. He fell short by 10 and change. But for some reason, 538 gives Roanoke College a D grade. But for some reason, they give the New York Times an A+ grade, despite the fact that the New York Times was off by 10 percentage points, give or take, in a lot of states back in the 2020 election. It doesn't matter because the big media corporations, they get the top grades. Some of these other pollsters, even though they've actually been accurate, they actually have been dead on, for some bizarre reason, they get a failing grade for exactly no reason. Maybe it's because they're more accurate. Who knows? They're trying to devalue the polls for some reason. But other polls, the polls that give 538 money, even though they've been off by 17 points in Wisconsin in 2020. No, ABC, they'll give them an A+ for one reason or another. And it's just very interesting to me when you hear some of these pollsters that have been more accurate in some of these states say, no, this is a close race in Virginia, which honestly, I don't think Trump's going to win Virginia. If you look at Virginia, it voted for Joe Biden by 10 points. I don't think it's going to vote for Kamala Harris by 10. It could even be within 5. But is this a top priority state for Donald Trump right here, right now? Probably not. I think he's better off focusing on winning Pennsylvania. He's up in Pennsylvania. He's led the last few polls that have come out of the state of Pennsylvania. He's much better off focusing on states like Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, states that he hasn't really shored up into his column quite yet, but he's still favored in. Defending those states is probably more of a priority than expanding the map into a place like Virginia. But still, it kind of just shows that when you have a poll that's accurate, historically, they're showing the same margin in a state that voted to the right of the other state by 12 points. They're showing the same margin. There's no universe where Trump is down 3 in Virginia, but for some reason he's losing North Carolina by 2 points. That just does not exist. That's not a real possibility in this universe. Now, if a Virginia is within 3, I wouldn't expect North Carolina to vote Republican by like 8 or 9 points, because it is true, the state is less elastic, it's less malleable. But just in terms of what we're seeing here, we're seeing pollsters go in different directions, and the polls that have been inaccurate, like the New York Times, that's what they're showing. The Georgia poll that they had, the dot map actually makes sense, and their poll probably, in my opinion, at the end of the day in Georgia, it's Trump +4. I honestly would think that that's a little bullish in my opinion. I think the state's going to be closer than that. I still think Trump is favored. But North Carolina, you look at their dot map, there's no votes out of Union County. You talk about the Charlotte exurbs, and that's like 14% of the state population overall. And they gave Donald Trump, a 2-to-1 margin, and it's like 50-50. And you see a big share of rural Republican areas that have blue dots. They're reaching the, librarians in these rural places instead of actually reaching the workers that are going to turn out and vote for Trump. And even then, they have the poll within the margin of error. Even then, they have the poll within 2. And while pollsters try to weigh for things like response bias, it's not always perfect, and that does go in both directions, and it's very possible that we could see a massive polling miss this fall, which would be huge because, Trump's already winning in a lot of the polls. He's winning in enough states to give him 270 electoral votes. Nationally, the popular vote is pretty much still up in the air. Harris is favored, but not favored by enough to win the Electoral College, and we've seen polls underestimate Trump before. Could we be seeing the same thing again? It's entirely possible. And this guy goes on and talks about it in this thread here, saying that college-educated Democrats are 4 times more likely to answer than non-college, which tend to be less partisan. And while weighting can help minimize the bias, it does not eliminate the problem. And this is something we experienced when we did our most recent national poll, where in the first sample, the first half of it, it was like D plus 16 or something like that. But in terms of all this educational weighting, typically Donald Trump has a unique point of strength among working class voters across the board, mainly working class white voters living in the Rust Belt and a lot of these other swing states. And the polls are just missing a lot of these voters in favor of other voters. And while you try to weigh for something like this, it's not entirely perfect overall. It's better with a large sample. And then we find out that the Harris internal campaign has polled like 300,000 people, and they're saying, wait a minute, hold up, Trump is still the favorite. David Axelrod is saying Trump is still the favorite. The internals are showing a much different picture, and they're, trying to poll a wider variety of voters in the process. But just in terms of what's going on, you could look into the polls. A lot of these crosstabs, people critique the crosstabs in the Trump-Biden polls. Usually they, kind of canceled out. For example, Trump was doing unusually well with minority voters, but he was also doing unusually weaker with white voters. That type of stuff is not enough to discredit a poll. It cancels out. But when you see crosstabs across the board favoring Democrats, like in some of these recent polls, where Kamala Harris is getting in the 40s among non-college white voters living in a few of these Midwestern states, she's like at 43%. That's kind of, going to bring a little bit of skepticism to the table. And even when you look into the polls, into some of these lesser focused on demographics like Emerson, they changed up their methodology. They got a Harris +4, and then they polled each religious group. And Donald Trump is getting close to 60% among Protestant voters, and he's doing even better for some reason among Catholic voters, which again is typically a swing demographic. Obama narrowly won Catholic voters. Trump did well in 2016. He did a little bit weaker in 2020, but still, you look at that demographic. If he's winning Catholic voters by 21%, that is just game over for the Democrats right there. When you look at that, and everybody knows it, and they're still not able to fully account for anything, but it's just more proof of the response bias. And it's funny because you have some polls that are showing the race being exactly where it was a few weeks ago, and you have some polls that still just don't know how to handle the Kamala Harris hype. They just don't know how to do it. They're going off the rails with this response bias stuff, and it's just causing a lot of chaos. And the media narrative about the race has done a complete and total 180, but is a lot of that 180 actually real? I mean, Harris definitely, you could say, getting Democrats on board or whatever. That's very true, but to this level of, a massive turnaround in her favorables, her net favorables going from -20 to -3 overnight. In certain polls, it's even more drastic of a shift. Does not exactly add up, in my opinion. The pollsters, once again, are missing certain voters. The polls, once again, are contradicting each other, and the election mafia is going out there, and they're giving the good polls the bad grades, and the bad polls the good grades, just to try and shape the narrative even further. But I don't believe it's going to work. I don't think Trump's going to win Virginia. I do believe he's going to win North Carolina. I think that he's in a very, very good shape in Pennsylvania, which means that he can win if he just gets Georgia, which I think is really just going to come down to turnout for both sides in the state of Georgia. There's not a lot of persuadable voters in the state overall. But if Trump doesn't get Georgia, he can win with Pennsylvania and Arizona and Nevada combined, where he's doing well in both. He could win with Wisconsin and Nevada, which he's probably going to do well in both as well. He can win with Pennsylvania and Michigan. Technically, that's kind of a very rare path for Trump, but that would put him at 269. He could win in the House of Representatives. We'll have to see what happens. We'll have to see how it shakes out. But either way, the election mafia is at it again, and this poll out of Virginia being just as close as their polls were a month or two ago in the state, when this poll's got a history of being very accurate, could put a little bit of a dagger into the narrative that's being spun right now about this Harris surge. So anyways, guys, make sure you like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle, out.